Jermaine, new IT director. We just went around the room and introduced ourselves, so guys, I should have waited.
Sorry. Just want to take.
Oh, yeah, especially this time of year. All right, so we called it to order. We did that. The approval of the minutes. Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes that were sent out after the last meeting? Anyone want to make a motion to approve or make any corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second? All approved? Aye. Great. This chairing thing is harder than I thought it might be. Okay, any public comment on any matter on the agenda? Does anyone have anything to talk about that's on the agenda? Anyone on the board? Oh, here comes Kurt. Hi, Kurt.
Lisa, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? I'm trying
Sorry.
to do your chair. Go ahead.
You'll do really good. I know you will.
I've already pretty well clubbed up all of it so far. So, okay, so we can go to the presentation. Jeremy, it's Fleege, right?
Yep.
I always said Fleege before, but I heard somebody else say so. Jeremy Fleege from Montana Resources agreed to come and give us an update on their site.
Yes, everyone online can see presentation. Sure. Those in the room have some samples of our concentrate too, so you can kind of see what product we have that goes out the door. So just to be able to pass around with you as I go through the presentation. But we have really two products that go out the door: copper concentrate, which is around 26 to 30% copper and trace amounts of silver that goes out via rail. And then molybdenum concentrate, which is around 55 to 60% molybdenum, and that goes super sacks. Obviously copper for many different applications, a lot for its conductive properties. Molybdenum for steel hardening or as a lubricant. So you may see moly rich grease, things like that, but the main purpose is for steel hardening. But figure to start with, give just an overall before I get kind of more into the environmental side, which is more my realm. Overall, right around 400 employees. Milling rate of 2024 of about 44,000 tons per day. Kind of a tough number to really wrap your head around. I'll give you another number that's also equally as hard to wrap your head around, but that equates to about a half a ton per second. So that's what our throughput is through our crushing, conveying, through our mills. So a half a ton per second in order to ultimately produce that 53 million pounds of copper and 8.89 million pounds of molybdenum. Silver is also a product that we get out the door that comes within our copper concentrate. So we just get credit for that as well through our copper concentrate. You see also there the mining rates of around 98,000 tons per day. So overall, when you talk mining, a lot of times there is what they call a stripping ratio. So the amount of material that you have to move to get to your ore. So overall, roughly speaking, we're about a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every ton that we move that goes to the mill, there's an extra ton that's being moved as what we call non-ore material. Most of the time they get called waste rock, but for us it serves a purpose. So we've kind of tried to strategically call it non-ore, and I'll get into that later in the presentation, what a lot of that non-ore material goes to. Here, just some dollar figures kind of show, the economic impact that Montana Resources provides, not only to our community, but to our state and to our nation in a lot of instances here. You see even there, the metal mine tax paid to Montana, that's $7 million. A lot of that actually comes back to our school district as well. When you look at our property and gross proceeds taxes, just to put that in context, that's, anywhere rough number about a quarter of our city county budget. So, pretty significant impact when it comes to county. And then you look at the purchases payroll locally, that's 71 million. So just to at least put that out there on just the impact of ongoing and continued mining within our community. We also have a philanthropic wing. It's actually Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation. So they also support the various companies within the Washington companies. Obviously one being Montana Resources. So this just shows then a breakdown 2022 through 2024, what that spend was within our community and surrounding communities. The bottom two are the ones that more I wanted to focus on here that we're very proud of. That's the Roland Erickson Scholarship Montana Tech, which has provided a full ride scholarship for their 4-year duration at Montana Tech, and that is for first generation students as well. So a lot of instances, times where students that maybe didn't have that push from others, or be able to see parents or older siblings that they can kind of follow in their footsteps. They're making that first trek on their own, and then provide them for scholarship, pay for that for full ride for their time at Montana Tech. And then one that we just recently started was at Highlands College for 3 scholarships per year for welding. And same thing goes for there, paying the 2 years to get that. Next up, just wanted to provide just a little overview before I get into the rest, just so you kind of get a feel. I'll touch up a little bit on here. So one thing that's very interesting at the site is to be able to see pre-regulation Berkeley pit and current regulation continental pits. So really open pit mining on both ends of the spectrum, where Berkeley pit was operated from 55 to 82. The continental pit did have some development prior to Montana Resources, so in the late 70s, but the main mining there has been since Montana Resources has been operating there, which is 1986 to current, with a little hiccup there 2000 to 2003, where we did have a shutdown or care and maintenance period based on high power costs, low commodity prices. So other than that, been going strong, and if all goes well, another 25 to 30 years ahead of us as well. So all material from the continental pit that's ore goes through our crushing and conveying, which starts down in this kind of lower left corner, primary crusher, makes it through to the mill, which I have no concentrator also listed on there. And then the thing to keep in mind when it comes to our ore concentrate is our copper is right around 0.25% copper. So very low grade, just lots of it. So when I talked about our copper concentrate, we're bringing that 0.25% copper, about 100 times improvement up to 26 to 30%. Our molybdenum in the ore body is around 0.03%. And we're bringing that up to around 55 to 60%, which is nearly 2,000 times higher concentration. So that's why it's not only a mill, it's a concentrator. We're concentrating those products from what we're getting in the ground and in the earth to something that then can go on to further refinement. Another thing to keep in mind, which we'll get into kind of on these subsequent slides, is when it comes to water treatment, we have 2 acid rock drainage water sources. So basically acidic water impacted with low pH and high metals. That would be one, the Berkeley pit. And then the other is the Horseshoe Bend area that you see here in the very middle, which is part of the tow drain to the Yankee Doodle tailings. So it doesn't go out the door as product, is really kind of our waste through that stream, which is tailings. So down in the middle center, you'll see those 3 circles down there, and those are tailings thickeners. Once we get that to the right density, we pump that up to the tailings impoundment, and that's the very top, the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment. So that's for permanent storage of tailings. And then at the north end of that is the Supernatant Pond, which is a really clean water source for on-site use for processed water, as well as influent to the polishing facility, which I'll be getting into here shortly. When I mentioned acidic water sources, the 2 main ones being the Berkeley pit, the other one being in this Horseshoe Bend area. It's the Horseshoe Bend seeps. So we have 2 waters that need treated and 2 water treatment systems. One being Horseshoe Bend Water Treatment Plant, which has been in operation since 2003. It's 2-stage high-density sludge water treatment. So we add lime, adjust pH, precipitate out metals. The other one's a similar version, but just a lot more simplified. It's kind of really a 1-stage treatment system, and it's called the Horseshoe Bend Capture System. And what that is it's just a pump back system that we pump one of those 2 water sources up to our tailings stream. We inject it into our tailings stream up by our booster station that used to sit there up in the skyline. That's now, just off the top of the embankment crest. And after that point, that tailings stream is carrying extra lime so that we can facilitate water treatment of that acidic water as well. And so at this point, all of the treated water, so up at the embankment crest right after that booster station, all of the treated water then is going to the tailings impoundment for settling and for reactions to come to completion. So the very unique thing with our site is not only do we have environmental and permitting items with our mine focus, but also overlap with the Butte Mine Flooding Operable Unit, the Superfund side of things. So with that, that's just one of the operable units of the larger Butte area national priority list. So there's 7 operable units there. The BMFOU is the only one that Montana Resources is a part of. Atlantic Ridgefield Company and Montana Resources share joint responsibility to manage that, with the Berkeley pit kind of being the focal point of that. Here, probably you've seen this before, but Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology digitized dope books from the Anaconda Company. And what this is a plan view and then a side view of underground workings, which in the Butte area are 10,000 miles plus underground workings. So they digitized them, show them on the plan view, and then also on the side view where you can see some of them went more than a mile deep. And then why they call it the Butte Mine Flooding Operable Unit is one of those shafts, the Kelly, it had a central dewatering system. And in 1982, those pumps were shut off and began to then flood the underground workings, and then resulted in water starting to then appear at the Berkeley pit, about a year after those pumps were shut off. So hence the name Butte Mine Flooding Operable Unit, is the flooding of those underground workings. Here just shows then kind of another depiction of the same. For the Butte Mine Flooding Operable Unit, it's broke up into East Camp, which is the Berkeley pit. West Camp, which is a treatment system that Atlantic Ridgefield operates, which is part of the lower area 1 and Butte treatment lagoons. And then Outer Camp. For the Berkeley pit, there's numerous points of compliance that are measured in order to make sure that the Berkeley pit remains the low point. So you can kind of see some of the various head frames there. Main one I want to point out is there towards the top, that pilot view. That point of compliance has the highest elevations out of the point of compliance that are part of routine water quality and water level checks. So that kind of leads to this next image where you can see there on the right, the pilot view surface elevation over 6,000 feet. Current water elevation on this one, it's not quite up to date, but it kind of shows that right around 5,380 feet. And the Berkeley pit around 5,356. So with the ultimate goal of the protected water level is to maintain the Berkeley as the sump, where the low point is. So water's flowing to the Berkeley and not away from the Berkeley. And then there's a protected water level set to make sure that that is maintained. So that's where this 5410 comes into play. So if the pilot butte were at an elevation of about 5410, the Berkeley would be somewhere in that 5385 to 5390, but it would still be the low point and still contained, but we don't want it to go above and start to change that gradient away from the Berkeley as opposed to the Berkeley. Big thing that was put into play make sure we could control that was the Berkeley Pit and Discharge Pilot Project. So that was started in September of 2019. Mark Thompson and I presented on that to a couple faces that are here, but many new faces as well. But we presented on that in 2020 when that was just underway, where now we have a lot more information on that, and we can understand it a little better now with years of information. So called it a pilot project. Don't confuse that with pilot scale. This was a full-scale system where we were treating 3 to 4 million gallons per day of Berkeley pit water, still treating the 4 million gallons per day of Horseshoe Bend area water, and discharging up to 9.5 million gallons per day to Silverbook Creek. So big reason was, if pumping from the Berkeley, can we control the other points of compliance? Is everything going to respond? The other thing is, we put in some new water treatment facilities, as well as Atlantic Richfield Company constructed the polishing facility. Are we able to achieve the discharge standards and, meet the objectives associated with that? And then another part of our conversation that we had with the LEPC was emergency action plan. And our emergency action plan is really associated with the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment and potential for, if that were to, have any release, what kind of consequence would be associated with that. So reduce the water volume, significantly reduce any potential consequence as well. This image, called the spaghetti diagram, it just shows lots of various flows. Quite a few of these were newly installed as part of this pilot project. So Montana Resources handled the on-site portion of it, which involved construction of 2 new pump houses to be able to do the water treatment for that Horseshoe Bend capture system, and about 7 new miles of pipe that we put on site. So HDPE, high density polyethylene lines that were fused together and rerouting water around the site to facilitate water treatment, as well as water to the polishing facility. Atlantic Richfield Company constructed the polishing facility, which consisted of multimedia filtration in order to remove suspended solids that could carry metals, and then reduce pH. The water stored in the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment at that north end of the pond really meets water quality standards as it is, with the exception of pH. So that's where, let's send it through some filtration. So it's just multimedia, sand, and anthracite to be able to make sure removing any suspended solids and then adjusting the pH. There also is reverse osmosis capability, and that's really for achieving in-stream chronic toxicity. So if receiving streams are low and we need to add cleaner water to the discharge, that's when reverse osmosis would come into play to be able to reduce calcium and sulfate, which are the drivers towards toxicity in stream. So here to kind of show really the successes and kind of, starting out September 2019 when this came online, and really through Q3, so September 2024, so 5 years, and really what we've learned in that period. So we've successfully discharged over 8.8 billion gallons of water to Silverbook Creek, over 6 billion gallons pumped and treated from the Berkeley pit. Berkeley pit elevation, we've actually dropped by almost 1/4 foot. Our goal is not at this time to create storage there or to drop the elevation. It's really to maintain that elevation. One thing that we have noticed, though, is that it's a very dynamic system. So you see the Berkeley pit drop by 1/4 foot, whereas that point of compliance that I mentioned, the Pilot Butte, which is the highest or leading point of compliance, dropped by over 2 feet. So it's really just a very large dynamic system where we're creating storage elsewhere, even though we're not realizing it at the Berkeley. But ultimately, like I said, our goal is just to maintain the Berkeley. We have had instances where we've had some maintenance activities where we're not pumping out of the Berkeley for, a couple of weeks at a time. And one time we were doing a rare earth element study, and we were returning the water for about a month, and the elevation of the Berkeley didn't change. So that's, I think, just shows how massive the system is, where it's not just the Berkeley, it's all the points of compliance around it. But we have shown a high level of success at managing this objective, which was the connectivity with the points of compliance. This is a graph that Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology produces. So this just shows the start of the pilot project with those red pluses and the green line being the Berkeley pit. So virtually held steady. You'll see a couple gaps there where there were frozen pit conditions that an elevation was not obtained. And then you can see various points of compliance, with the very top one being the pilot Butte. So you see that shows just that, the achieving the points of compliance had good connectivity, and we're able to control those points by pumping and treating out of Berkeley. The next objective was, can we discharge water and discharge it successfully? And what we found is that we're significantly lower than the discharge standards that are set forth in the consent decree, our guiding document for discharge. And since September 2019, we've had over 1,600 samples tested for over 14,000 compliance parameters and no exceeds. So one thing that's unique with our discharge is that any day we discharge, we have to collect and submit samples. So other discharge permits might be weekly, bi-weekly, or some other frequency, but ours is any day we discharge, we have to have a positive sample for that day. One of the other main objectives was switch slides. Reducing pond inventory. So from the start of the pilot project, the Yankee Doodle tailings pond, so the supernatant pond there at the north of the tailings beach, was over 34,000 acre feet. And through this pilot project, we've now reduced it down to 15,300 acre feet in 2024, which is where we're looking to hold it steady. So where we were discharging as much water out the door for the time from 2019 through 2024, now we're in more of a, call it a steady state during active mining. When we have high precip years, we're going to be discharging more. Dry years, we may discharge very little to none. So it is highly dependent on climatic conditions. But overall, what we learned is that we're able to control pond volume by discharge and be able to help utilize that as a tool for water management on the site. One other item too is when I mentioned reduced pond volume, reduced potential consequence. That is a lot of stored water still up there when you look at 15,000 acre feet. And if you were to have a breach, you pretty well have to time that by 2 based upon the scouring effect. 15,000 acre feet is going to carry another 15,000 acre feet of material if that were to breach. So you almost have to double that as far as what the potential is for downstream impact. So one other item that we did, and we just completed this in 2022, was right where you see where that blue encounters diversion berm on the picture on the left, is we did some topographic enhancement. We created a very large earthen berm there to be able to then direct any material in a hypothetical breach to the Berkeley pit and or the Continental pit.
This
so
is
that's
in
where you see it. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. I didn't hear where you were calling from.
She did tell me she didn't have my
Oh,
microphone.
yes. Yes. Thank you for calling back.
I don't know if maybe we can mute her from that one. There's a, Karen, you have a mouse to that side. You don't want to give this C right there.
Yes. I'm looking for that now. I've got several open here and that's where that was. What was the date of that incident again, please?
I go to people and then get them all. All right.
We mute her? Okay, sorry.
So when I get those back up, see the picture on the left, that just shows then to kind of give an idea where.
Totally blind.
Where that berm is located, and then there kind of shows the max water depth then at that. So, when it comes to what we call a piping failure, or if there was a slump based upon earthquake, something like that, we have the ability with our topographic control that those flows would not go downstream into the concentrator area or potentially offsite. One thing to keep in mind, this isn't for a flood type event. Flood type event, we're probably going to see a lot more going on when it comes to everywhere within the community. We would probably have some other options in play where we divert water to the continental pit and have some other things be discharging water off site, but that's going to be a pretty gloomy day for everyone in the area, and would come with advanced warning, whereas, earthquake does not come with those advanced warnings. So that's where this helps to, create reason for optimism that, we're able to control anything like that on site if the worst were to.
What type of rainstorm would it take to really cause a problem?
Yeah, so our facility is designed to be able to handle what's called the probable maximum flood event, which is probable maximum precipitation event, plus a 1 in 100 year snowmelt event, plus molten reservoirs failing.
Like all
So
of it at the same
all
time?
at the same time.
Oh, so it's.
So
like-
we're talking almost 15 inches of precip in the PMP, almost 15 inches of precip in the 1 in 100 year, plus the molten reservoirs failing, which is, I think, 640 acre feet. So very significant. I think it's 6 billion gallons of water that it's designed to be able to manage without, as it is right now. That's without us diverting water to discharge, diverting water to the continental pit, items like that. So pretty significant. If we're in a situation like that, like I said, that's going to be very impactful to everyone in the community as well as everywhere in the region as well. Next, going to kind of just switch over to the mining site, and perfect segue into that too. So into the mining site. So there is a lot of overlap, and that's kind of why I had those circles there in that little overlap, because kind of wear both hats and switch hats at different times. That gets into then the design of the facility, which is exactly what Lisa kind of brought up there, was with that. In addition to being able to handle the probable maximum flood event, it's also designed to be able to handle a maximum credible earthquake, which we undertook a more recent study on the faults in the area. And what our design basis is for a magnitude 7.0 on the continental fault, which is one that runs just to in between the facility and the East Ridge. So another thing there, you can see all those points there. Most of those are all associated with investigation drilling that we did. And anytime we do drilling, we install instrumentation as well. So of those locations, we have over 200 different instrumented points that we have real-time access to. So it's all set up on data to be able to go directly to our office, as well as to our engineer record in Vancouver, British Columbia. And then if certain thresholds are met, there's calls and emails that then go out as well. So we have kind of a low tier, high tier type calling tree depending on the scenario. And I guess one more thing that I did want to bring up when it comes to the tailings facility is there's really two things that drive permitting for our mine and for most mines. It's ore reserves and then tailing storage. One thing that's, I guess, Montana should be very proud of is that in 2015, there were some global tailings facility catastrophes that occurred. Some in South America and one actually a little closer in British Columbia, Mount Poly. And Montana passed some new tailings legislation that is really industry leading. And what it did is created the need to have an engineer of record for the facility, as well as an independent review panel. So in our instance, we have 3 to 4 independent review panelists that are part of the facility to be able to review design documents. And, they're the folks that write books on the stuff, that teach it. They're world renowned experts on it. One thing also that you can do is go to montanaresources.com. And if you go into the environmental tab and Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment, there's a risk assessment that was put on actually at the EOC last fall, I believe. Dr. Peter Robertson. So it's really is a good listen. He's, kind of puts the risk into perspective and tries to help to understand, and really allows everything that goes into the facility. So it's just a really good watch. And I guess I suggest taking a chance to go and see that. The other thing that we've done too is we're looking to have a lot of our documents from an environmental standpoint and regulatory standpoint on the website as well. So we started that. There's quite a bit that's on there, and we're continuing to build that out. But we don't need people to have to go to the DEQ for a FOIA request or anything like that. We want to be transparent and provide those, make it easy for people to access. So if you go there, there's quite a few documents already there, and we're continuing to work at refining. So that brings me to the next point. When I mentioned tailing storage is a big part. Right now, we are permitted to an elevation of 6,450 feet at our tailings impoundment. That's currently the height that it's built out to right now. That would provide tailing storage till around 2032. We do have ore reserves permitted well beyond that. And that's what our next permit is looking to do, which we're looking to submit in Q1 of 2025, is to be able to raise that to an elevation of 6,560 feet over multiple lifts. So we wouldn't do it all at once. It would be over time that would occur. And that would give us, where our tailing storage matches our ore reserves, and be able to provide mining opportunity with our current reserves into 2053. It counts for all tailings and waste rock generated by the 2022 life of mine. With the permitting process, I'm not going to go into all of these, but just shows kind of the robustness of our review. This is the design documents that need to be reviewed by the EOR and his team, reviewed by the independent review panel, submitted to DEQ for their review, and IRP signs off on that, and then DEQ would approve it through the permitting process as well. This just shows then kind of how that all plays out as far as continued mining and what the facility would look like. So on the left there is what's currently permitted, with those pink patches there being what has not been constructed yet, but that would be part of these upcoming next 5 to 7 years of construction. The next there on the right has this embankment up to a 6,500, so a 50-foot rise on the embankment crest, as well as step outs down below it as well. These next ones then get us through 2053, and this shows then building up to the 6,560 foot elevation on the embankment, and then the life of mine layout there to show continued non-ore or waste rock placement. Thing to keep in mind there is, and throughout all of these images and the chronology of it, is the more we mine, the safer the facility becomes. It's already designed for the probable max flood, for the maximum credible earthquake, and instrumented to make sure we're keeping it within the constraints that it should operate and function at. But the more material we have is this non-ore. Our non-ore placement is strategic, that it's going into locations to help keep that facility even further stable into the future. So I think it's something that, not only to be able to continue to provide an economic impact to the community and to the region, but also to continue to make that facility safer and safer as we progress. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
There's a lot of information. I feel like I should have studied a little bit first. No.
So in 2053, what happens with the lake up there? Does that need to be managed and maintained still?
Yeah, so various waters around the site. I'll kind of just, expand on your question just a little bit. So waters that are part of the consent decree, which are, no one likes to hear this word, but perpetuity waters, are Horseshoe Bend area seeps, Berkeley Pit, and Continental Pit. Those are all managed under the consent decree. So Atlantic Richfield and Montana Resources. When it comes to waters that are part of the mine permit, that would be, the main focus would be the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment pond, so that pond to the north of the beach. As mining ceases, the beach would get capped and seeded, and there would be then less water that could make it into the pond from meteoric or from rainfall. There still would be water that would come in from some of those upper gradient drainages. So upper Silverbow Creek, Yankee Doodle Creek, Dixie Creek, and there would be a remnant pond up there that would remain and come into equilibrium with, precip and evaporation. As part of our permit currently, we would put a spillway in that would connect that pond to the continental pit. So if there were a major flood on top of a major flood, that water doesn't come to the embankment. It actually would then have a spillway to drain to the continental pit. There's still discussion whether there would be discharge to try to get that pond dropped faster right away, or if it would just be kind of naturally get down to its steady state pond over time. We call that, it'll be an our permit application. One is an active drawdown scenario versus passive drawdown. Passive is just let nature take its course through evaporation and precip, and it would continue to decline, but it would just take a little bit.
But in theory, it remain clean and not turn into.
Correct.
Acidic.
Yeah. Yep. I know people have always called that acid lake, and it's far from that. It's basic. I mean, we keep it actually at a high pH, right around 10.5 to 11, in order to keep the metals depressed and keep it clean. But overall, the water that's coming into there and the water in that area would remain, more of a neutral. That's part of a geochemical study that has to take place for this permit as well, is to make sure what that resulting water quality would be like post mining as it goes down to a steady state pond size.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. So I'm with the Weather Service, and we always are tracking flash flooding and stuff, and most of our forecast area isn't really flash flood prone, but burn scars areas have been denuded, vegetation are flood prone. And I look at your area, and I'm not really talking about flash flooding as a threat to the public, but even within your operations, have you seen a lot of debris flows or flash flood when you have big thunderstorms come over your area that impact your operations?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have a lot of disturbed areas, so can be some rilling and debris flow when it comes to that. But, for the most part, it hasn't been anything detrimental. It's just a matter, for our instances, is making sure that we monitor our BMPs or, burns to make sure that we're containing that water on site. We're in a dry, overall, we're still in a dry environment, and mining is water intensive. So we do like having the water and keeping the water. So that's kind of a major goal as well. Even the example, I mean, a lot of water from the Butte Hill is directed to the mine, like the Kelly diversion, Belmont diversion, and then even some that are up at Walkerville. But overall, it has not been a major issue with the flash flooding. We just have to, make sure that our ditches and channels can accommodate it. But overall, when you look at our main storage locations, there's lots of storage capacity, and that being, the Berkeley pit, our tailings impoundment, the continental pit, as well as what we call the dredge pond, where we have the ability to accommodate flows, pump them to the mill. And when the worst does happen, if that dredge pond were to overflow, it has a discharge structure that goes to the Berkeley. So, we have management techniques in place to be able to handle if they do overwhelm us as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking, for us, it's hard to come up with thresholds of what will cause flooding on a burn scar. And you almost have a laboratory sitting there that it'd be interesting to see what sort of threshold it takes. It's a little different, burn scars really make the soil hydrophobic with a hot fire, and you don't have that necessarily. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. Just wondered what you have seen over the years.
I think our biggest issue probably there is making sure we keep up with, managing the best management practices or that just culverts, ditches, that stuff. If it does have debris flow, that they're getting cleaned out or scoured out afterwards to make sure that we're not losing capacity. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Sorry, it was a little long. A lot of information. I know how to, gotta have kind of the background to get the current too.
Next time we'll have to ask you back for 5 years. I think it's been too long.
Well, I think
Or is
when
it
we
four?
get our permit application in and we're kind of going through the public comment stage, probably actually pass that one off to McGivern or Thompson, but I
Oh, good.
think we would like
So you
to
need
see
to,
that.
great.
Yeah.
That would be great. When is that going to be, do you think?
Plan to submit in the first quarter of this upcoming year, so, I'd say probably 6-8 months down the road that we want to start getting out and
All
getting
right.
in front of people after DEQ has their first bite at it.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so we're going to hazmat. We didn't have any new reported spills. And we did get a letter from DEQ saying that, the spill that happened back in March 13th, it has been cleaned up. So that was nice. We got a little follow-up from it. And, a couple months ago, I did get a note in the mail from the state, from the CERC, which is the State Emergency Response Committee, about high hazard flammable trains that go through each area of the state. And for Silverville County, we have 0 to carry crude, 0 to carry ethanol, and then other is 0 to 1. So I guess it's low probability that we have these high hazard trains coming through. And a high hazard train is transporting 35 cars in total, or 20 cars consecutively that contain covered flammable liquids and notable crude oil, and ethanol, or other materials. So that was good news. And then there were no emergency alerts issued this period. And then Nikki from Montana Precision Products, did you have an update?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how involved our company's been within this group in the last year or two. So I thought I'd just kind of give an overview of who we are, where we're located, and what we do. So we're Montana Precision Products. We're actually located out in Industrial Park, just past the drive-in movie theater area. We're a fairly small facility. We're actually a joint venture company between GE Aerospace and CCAST of Montana. And so we primarily do investment casting, CNC machining, tube bending, and then tube and duct fabrication. The GE Aerospace side recently did an internal audit of our site. They do this to all their facilities every 3 years. And one of their findings was on the EPRA tier 2, reporting that we have adequate documentation, that we've actually tried to reach out to all the various emergency of what we have on our site and what kind of potential hazards there might be in an emergency response situation. So just to summarize that, I know the LEPC uses the state E-plan and I believe the CERC uses it, but I wasn't sure about the fire department or police department or hospital. So if anybody's interested in our site tier 2 report, it's available either from the LEPC or us personally. Really, as far as the quantities over 10,000 pounds, we really just primarily have waxes, sands, some binders, and then we do have a liquid argon that has capacity. So our primary hazard at our site would be a major fire. We don't have really anything hazardous beyond that. So if there's any questions, just let me know. It's an update.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so again, the Homeland Security grant application period opens in January, so that's right around the corner. And I still just going on the same idea. So if anyone's been thinking about it and has any other, ideas of things that we should approve, even just to start the conversation now, even if we don't put in for that grant this time, it's good to talk about those things and keep them in the discussions. For training and exercises, at the beginning of December, we had the opportunity to go to this, it's a national emergency management class, part of their basic academy for the science of disasters. I had been registered to attend this in 2021, was unable to attend, and it doesn't show up very often. In Montana, it hasn't been here for a long time. And so James and I suddenly had an opening in our schedules, and so we went. So it was 3 days in Helena, we drove back and forth, and they went over everything. It was a lot with climatology and earthquakes. Mike Stickney was the subject matter expert that presented there, but it was a good opportunity. Another thing that came up was, another reason I'm bringing this up, it was kind of interesting, where we were talking about how the EOC, we have an MOU in place for the state and Butte-Silver both to exchange facilities or use each other's facilities in time. Well, there's also a mutual aid portion of this where if someone's having a bad day in their county, that you can call out support. And they're trying to get a more structured, something more structured in place to do this. But Cascade County had a bad day, and so they needed 2 people to come up and help. And so they called me. I happened to be out with search and rescue for the Thompson food drive, and so I answered the call, and they're looking for 2 people to come up. And so I went. And I picked up a guy from the state, and it was really neat. He had Cascade County has something very interesting in place where they have an emergency management specialist on retainer. And so he's the one who all of a sudden, what their problem was, it was a criminal investigation for a landfill for a homicide victim. And so it kind of was growing and growing, and so they decided to do the ICS incident command system to it, and so they needed people for planning. Then after we got the planning caught up, I transferred over to the finance branch and helped her stay caught up because it was just hectic. They just needed more hands, but it was kind of nice. And so once that's more structured, if we ever have a bad day, it's nice for us to show up and help people, because then we know people will come and help us as well. Marty, do you have anything? I also have hospital, but I don't have you on here, but I do have a little note if there's any updates that you want to say.
Yeah, I could probably talk for a few minutes here. Let me share my screen. Just a little recap of how the winter's going. It's kind of interesting. It looked like it was going to be a La Nina winter. There's still some thoughts about it. I can talk later, but it hasn't really started out that way. This is looking at the temperature and precip graph of Butte for the water year starting October 1st. And the dark blue lines are what actually happened for highs and lows. And then the red and the green and the blue constitute the maximums in red, the minimums in blue records. And then the green space here is the normal high and low on any given day for Butte. And so you can see, if you remember back in October, we had a really nice, by most standards, October, real warm, started getting a little bit more variable in November. But here in December, by and large, we've been warmer than normal through that period. And then on the bottom graph, the sort of brighter green is what's actually happened for precip since October 1st. And the light green curve is the normal, what we should be on any given date. So anytime we're in brown, we're in a deficit. So we've been in a deficit since the beginning. That really nice October, wasn't a lot of precip during that month. Then we started getting a little bit toward the end of the month, very little bit in November. It's been pretty flat line. So we're already 0.8 of a inch in deficit for the water year. With this particular website, you can look at actual, you can go back and look at the calendar year, you can look at previous months, or here's the current month. So sometimes I just like to go and look at the text version about where we've been. And, our lows have been periodically chilly in Butte, nothing new there, but some of these highs have been pretty mild for December. You can look it down here at the bottom too, and especially over here in the precip, and you can see we just had 0.13 inches when our normal should be about a half inch already. So anyway, we're just continuing that drought, and it's left our snowpack pretty meager for this part of the state, your part of the state. The northwest corner of Montana is about the only thing that's really been receiving consistently good precipitation here for a while. So, we're about 78% of snowpack, super early in the season though. So we'll watch to see how that progresses. If you look at drought, the Weather Service is sort of mandated to put out a drought statement if we have certain levels of drought in the state. We're not necessarily the arbiters of drought. That's more of an interagency group of folks that deal with that. But here's the latest and greatest for the state. So if you can see there on the map, I know it's pretty small. I guess I can make that a little bit bigger. Anywhere from about your area, Butte, on up through kind of northern Powell County, it has the worst drought within the area. That the Blackfoot River drainage has been for a year now what's been probably the worst shape from a river standpoint. Wasn't long ago the whole state had some level of drought, but again, northwest Montana has been receiving precipitation, so we've removed drought status for them. So anyway, that's where we're at with the drought levels. If we look at the here and now, on our webpage, we're sort of focused on wind today. Some snow, winter impacts in the mountains, but most of our area, it's just looking at wind. So we have high wind warnings out. And the winds have just started hitting here in Missoula. We started getting gusts to around 40 miles an hour or so. Around the area though, down in your area, I haven't seen a whole lot from the sensors. McDonald Pass has been up over 50 miles an hour. Clear over here in Spokane, they've had some 60, 70 miles an hour, and they just had a couple fatalities from a tree blown down out near the airport there in Spokane. So, and up here in the Northwest, I won't really show you. Every time we move this map, it tries to reload everything. But anyway, the winds haven't really kicked in mass yet, but that high wind warning just started an hour or two ago. So we'll watch for those winds through the evening hours. And if we look at the satellite image, you might not be able to see it back here, but here's Montana. Here's this weather system pushing through is what's given us that wind. It's a nice frontal band that's coming through, and it's just a matter of how quickly it's going to mix down into the valleys. The mountains are a sure thing for getting those winds. Again, there's a little bit of snow with it, mainly from kind of Missoula north. I'll show the radar here in a minute. Shouldn't say snow. It's mountain snow. It's relatively high snow levels though. We're just getting rain down here in the valleys at times. And that's been our problem as far as getting winter started. I know a lot of people wouldn't complain about that, but we've been under a big high pressure ridge over here in the west with moist southwest flow hitting the Pacific coast. So they've been pummeled with, various forms of atmospheric rivers that you guys have probably followed in the news. Atmospheric rivers are big flooding events for, anywhere from Northern California up through, British Columbia on the coast. How much gets to the Northern Rockies, though, is always up in the air, and it always drops a lot of that precip before it gets to us, and they haven't been very impactful for us, but that's what's been keeping northwest Montana pretty wet. But it's also been keeping our snow levels really high because it's always kind of a southwest to west flow coming up over us, and so high level snow we're starting to get, but not much in the mid levels and low levels. Here's the radar, current radar image. You know, anytime you get in the greens, you're into probably solid rain hitting the ground. Blues might be mountain precip, but it may not be hitting the ground. Looks like it's just sort of on the edge of Butte, but I will caution you, when you're looking at the radar, especially wintertime precipitation, it's not being produced very high in the atmosphere. So it starts to form underneath the radar umbrella. So our radar is just north of Missoula here. So by the time it gets down to Butte, I've seen sometimes precipitation looks like it's fading away. Well, it's not. It's just getting too low for the radar to see it. So that's why we have to rely on ground reports and stuff. So anyway, you might see some showers around, and at your elevation, probably would be in the form of snow and versus rain. If we start looking out a little bit farther, our 8 to 10, 6 to 10, and 8 to 14 day forecast really are indicative of that long wave ridging that we've had forever. Almost the entire U.S. is should be above normal temperatures, you know, as we close out December. And then for moisture, it's a little tougher. Again, the Pacific coast in this flow is a sure bet of getting wet. The farther inland you go, the less confidence you get with being wet. But it's still showing Western Montana being wetter than normal. And it just looks like we'll keep having things like this. The ridge, a weather system will move through the ridge, and the ridge will pump back up. And then here's another weather system, the ridge will pump up. And we just haven't really got into a true winter pattern yet. There still looks like, you know, you lose confidence the farther out you get, of course, but it sort of looks like we'll start getting into colder pattern kind of mid-January and beyond. But, you know, that's a long ways out to say with much confidence. If we look at the 1 month forecast, these both, the temperature and precip are both looking at 1 month forecast. They update those twice a month. That's why we show them two here. There's this one was done November 21st for December. And it's kind of interesting to look at the two. And then this one was done at the very last day of November for December. So, you know, the one done back mid-November did not really have a very good temperature forecast for December, at least what's playing out. But the one they updated at the end of November did capture this real warmer than normal December that we've had. So that's why they update that twice. Unfortunately, the seasonal forecasts, and that's what we're looking here at the bottom, are only updated once a month, and that's the third Thursday of every month, which is tomorrow. So this is still an old forecast, and it's for December, January, February. The one that comes out tomorrow then will push a month ahead, be January, February, March. I still suspect that will show a wetter than normal forecast, and probably even still show a below normal temperature forecast based on what we think we see coming in January. But anyway, stay tuned on that. It's pretty late in the game for the true La Nina forecast to show up. You know, if it occurred in November, we could have a good La Nina winter, which would be a high snowpack. Little skeptical on La Nina setting up in the Pacific, but we'll see. It does look like our winter will probably get a little bit more active coming January and February. But I'm not sure we'll end up above normal for mountain snowpack. So we'll be watching that for water supply and also runoff season next spring. That's it, Lisa.
Right. Well, thank you very much. So we'll go to health. Just you have a quick between you and Jennifer's.
Yeah, really quick update. Respiratory virus season is really starting to pick up. Influenza is starting to circulate. COVID rates remain high, and we've added pertussis to the mix. So health department's having a Tdap, DTaP vaccine clinic tonight from 5 to 7. So if you know anybody that needs a pertussis vaccine, it's a good time to walk in and get one. And then also tomorrow at 2, health department's offering in the naloxone administration training for anybody that wants to come and get trained on naloxone administration. Jennifer can't be here. She apologizes. But her updates are the Montana Western Regional Healthcare Coalition executive team members, which was her and Nick Holloway, along with 3 other Montana coalitions, attended the National Healthcare Coalition Conference this week. And she said more to come for lessons and presentations that she will share when she gets back. St. James is in the process of changing out their main switchgear to the facility. shutdown started the week of November 11th, and the site will have multiple shutdowns from December through the end of summer 2025. And the hospital has also adopted the Administration for Safety Response Risk Identification and Site Criticality Toolkit Hazard Vulnerability Analysis tool for our 2025-26 HVA. And she said she will have this completed next month and will share a copy with them. Thanks, Jess.
Something to look forward to. All right.
And I tried to say it as fast as she could.
We still could catch all the words. Good job. Does anybody else have any updates they'd like to share? All right, hearing none, I will just say before we adjourn that next month, for the presentation, we have the U.S. Forest Service Highlands Fuels Reduction Project. The district ranger and the fuel specialist, Jesse Myers, have agreed to come in and present to us to tell us how that's. Does anyone, want to make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, staff.
Make the motion.
Okay. John, anyone second? All right, well, sorry, we ran a little bit late, but thank you, everyone. And please take
Thanks, Lisa.